Welcome to our annual Pinderhughes Diversity Lecture. And I'm so glad so many of you are joining us. And I am doubly glad that Professor Elaine Pinderhughes is ready and will be shortly making her remarks, and we'll get this afternoon started soon. But before we go to Professor Pinderhughes, I should just like to remind everyone that we're doing this in a webinar style, so later you'll have a chance to ask questions as well. Now, we started this lecture series in 2007, and this lecture series is very intentional in addressing the core concerns of Professor Pinderhughes that she has pursued throughout her social work practice and her academic career, and continues to do so till today. And so the lectures over the years have touched on a variety of issues and concerns that are central to Professor Pinderhughes's interests and that have animated her contributions to social work and social work practice. You know, she has been prescient in so many ways, and you know, if you read Professor Pinderhughes's writings, every decade or so, she says something that then everybody picks up on, and she's always ahead of the curve. In 1982, in social work, writing on family functioning of Afro-Americans, she says, systems, environment, and structures are so critical to understanding practice with populations. And I think it is that concern of Professor Pinderhughes that is also at the core of our program today, that Professors Tyrone Parchment and Dr. Sam Bradley will be discussing our Black Leadership Initiative while being moderated by our adjunct faculty member, Luana Milton. Now, let me quickly introduce Professor Parchment and Dr. Sam Bradley, and then we'll move to Professor Pinderhughes for some of our introductory remarks. Dr. Tyrone Parchment is an assistant professor and founding co-director of our Black Leadership Initiative at Boston College School of Social Work. And he recently completed the Academy of African-Centered Social Work through the National Association of Black Social Workers. He is very much concerned about how social work practice, policy, curriculum, and pedagogy look like when we center the lived experiences of people from the African diaspora. His co-founder of the Black Leadership Initiative at Boston College is Dr. Sam Bradley, and he's a professor of the practice at the School of Social Work, and his focus is on innovation and equity within organizations. And within the school, Dr. Bradley has given leadership as chair of the Leaders for the Equity and Justice in the Workplace certificate. And as I mentioned previously, he's a co-founder of the Black Leadership Initiative. He comes with enormous practice experience in Louisiana, and now really shaping with colleagues like Tyrone and others in the school, the future of our work that both honors Professor Pinderhughes's legacy and also trains cutting edge social workers for practice. With that, let me turn it over to Professor Pinderhughes. Welcome, Professor Pinderhughes. So good to see you.
I want to speak specifically to the journey that I underwent that led me to develop my philosophy and approach to my work. My journey began at a child treatment agency where clinicians began to ask, what is it I need to know to help Black children. Soon it became clear that we needed to look at ourselves in the context of many layers and levels of cultural influence. Among these layers, we found out were our own culture as it influences us, and the overarching influence of Western United States-based American culture. Then we realized that we had to separate race from ethnicity because up to this point, we had discussed these as one and the same. This added more levels of complexity. Since none of this had been articulated, but was operating at every time we spoke and thought about it, but we didn't really consciously know it. In trying to understand this, the discussion led to a need to examine American culture, which in turn led to the realization that we needed to examine white culture. In other words, the issue of race began to be salient. In the process of examining this, among many issues that emerged were two things that I will name here. Number one, it was the pain and the challenges to the sanity of Black clinicians and the perceived threat to white clinicians upon being asked to examine their whiteness and their privilege. We started to look at race, for example, asking ourselves, what does it mean to be white? What does it mean to be a person of color? And a lot of information came out that we had not yet identified that were influencing us all the time. This process of analysis also helped us to understand what implicit factors exist that influence how we process experiences, how we engage in these experiences, and how we respond to them. The issue then became, how do you teach this material when you don't even know what you are bringing to the interpretation of the material? We had to put this all in words. This led to us focusing on ourselves and on what messaging we ourselves carry about ourselves and others that we needed to understand more about. So we were adding layers here. We decided to have a mechanism that would allow us to identify these complexities clearly enough that we could help the students to manage these issues at the clinical interface. We became devoted to look at these complexities and the ways that students could learn to manage them, realizing that all of us, students and faculty, I repeat that, all of us, students and faculty, need to do this work for our students to eventually be effective from a multicultural perspective.
Beautiful remarks. Thank you, Professor Pinderhughes. And I think we should now, to honor these opening remarks, move to the discussion between Parchment, Bradley, and Luana Milton that picks up on these themes.
Hello. Hi, Dr. Parchment, Dr. Bradley. I'm so excited to be here, to be facilitating this conversation with regards to the Black Leadership Initiative, the Afrocentric work, Afrocentric field of practice is Afrocentric Social Work, and its connection to the legacy of Professor Pinderhughes. So I want to get right to it. My first question to the both of you. What was your intention on founding the Black Leadership Initiative and developing the Afrocentric field of practice?
Great, so I could start, Dr. Bad, if you don't mind. We'll start, there are so many people, individual scholars, just like Professor Emerita Pinderhughes, that gave the foundation as to why we created the Black Leadership Initiative. And one of the striking points that I got out of reading Professor Emerita Pinderhughes' work was the need to aid ethnically marginalized students and the importance to remain positively connected with their own cultural group, and the importance of helping students to think and behave flexibly and to go beyond the surface that help challenge and be challenges in their thinking in new and interesting ways. And one way of doing that is the Afrocentric perspective, African-centered theory. So there are tons of scholars who came out in the 1970s that laid the foundation for Afrocentric perspective, African-centered theory. They are Dr. Naeem Akbar, Dr. Wade Nobles, Dr. Linda James Myers, Dr. Kobe Kabone, Dr. Molefi Kete Asante, and Dr. Karenga. And then you saw a shift that this particular perspective and theory also entered the social work world. Actually, the first article that I read about African-centered social work was from Dr. Jerome Shealy. And so that was in the 1990s. But it also came out of the National Association of Black Social Workers, particularly the first two presidents of the National Association of Black Social Workers who brought that in. And then we also have Dr. Aminifu Harvey, Dr. Trisha Bent Goodley, Dr. Kalita Fairfax, and Dr. Iris Carlton-Lene, who also expanded the role in which how much African-centered social work is needed, particularly of those of the African diaspora. And I will also say myself and Dr. Bradley, even you too, Professor Milton, when we discuss our experiences in getting our MSWs, and for Dr. Bradley and our PhD, a lot of the content that we received did not center the lived experience of Black folks. And I will also say it didn't center many other groups who are not white. And so a lot of my training was like, can I build in this perspective in the people that I work with? Because it looks different of how we discuss and understand well-being and wellness when it's of the people of our own ethnic and cultural identity. But also, Black people or folks of African diaspora, this heterogeneity within our own groups. And we also heard from current students, from alumni, just like yourself, Professor Milton, that there was something in depth really missing in social work, right? And that there are unique experiences and contexts of how to effectively provide culturally responsive treatment, whether it be on a clinical level, on a macro level, in working with Black people. And that we need to really center that, because the current iteration of social work education, there's a lot of work, and not only with social work, but across many disciplines, that it's not critical, it's not holistic, it's not liberatory. And there are implicit and explicit forms of policing and paternalism that social work education really needs to uncover. And yeah, I think that was one of many parts of why we decided of creating the Black Leadership Initiative here at the school. But I definitely wanted to ground that we did not create this. There are others who created the foundation of us being able to think thoroughly of how can we maximize our agency to be able to create a initiative to really help and support the next generation and current generation of social workers. So that is Professor Emerita Pinderhughes, as well as Dr. Jerome Shealy, Dr. Harvey, Dr. Trisha Ben Goodley, Dr. Kalita Fairfax, and Dr. Iris Carlton-Lene, and countless others who are really bringing the field forward.
Thank you. Thank you. How about you, Dr. Bradley?
Well, let me just start by saying a very warm welcome and thank you to Professor Elaine Pinderhughes and to Dr. Ellen Pinderhughes and Dr. Rick Pinderhughes, who teaches in the BLI program. I think one of the things that's most inspiring to me is always, thinking about the research, but also thinking about our familial connections to one another. I think my colleague, Dr. Parchment, hit on this, which is that I very much so feel that I'm standing on the shoulders of giants in this space, and I'm deeply humbled to be here, but also inspired and motivated to keep going, because I know that there's been so much work that's been put in before I arrived here in search of creating supportive educational opportunities for Black social workers. And so, for me, it's just really important to continue to carry that torch, to do that connected to a community and to a body of work, research, and literature, as Dr. Parchment has. I think I probably draw my most of my inspiration from Dr. Fairfax, as mentioned before, and Dr. Carlton Lene. I think with regards to Dr. Fairfax, her work on really thinking and onto epistemological approach to Afrocentric theory has helped to ground me in understanding that when we talk about literacy, oftentimes we talk about those things that we read or languages that we speak, but that it goes much deeper than that, that culture in and of itself is a kind of language, a kind of way of being with and communicating with other folks. So I'm particularly struck by Professor Pinderhughes' statement about what does this look like with regard to a clinical interface, right? And I think for us, we're both exploring what that looks like and teaching at the same time, right? It's a constant evolution of calling upon our elders and the rich research that they've done, as well as exploring new territory with regard to how we can push the boundaries, really thinking from perspectives like Afrofuturism, right? And design, and how do those things, provide for us potentially a runway for how we move forward in terms of new interventions for the future. So I'm always, thinking about, from my perspective, what can we do to sort of push the envelope a little bit further in social work. I think I would live and die a happy man, constantly sort of challenging the profession to think about new opportunities that we can expand into with regard to our practice. So for me, innovation and design have always been really important aspects. Oftentimes people say to me, well, I see you more as a DEI person than an innovation person. And I go back and forth because I end up putting equity at the center of the designs that I want to work at. Any student who's taken any class with me knows that my favorite motto is I like to build cool stuff with my friends, right? And so the idea that I would get to work with, Dr. Parchment, with you, Professor Milton, to create not only something that would be cutting edge, right? Inspired by the leadership of so many, theorists and researchers and scholars who come before us, but the idea that we could build a new kind of community here at Boston College absolutely was the reason why I wanted to be involved with this project from the beginning.
Thank you. It sounds like, we're talking about the legacy of so many people that kind of led to this development, including Professor Pinderhughes, and how it's so interwoven into kind of the framework of the Black Leadership Initiative and the Afrocentric field of practice. It goes into my next question, which is what makes the work that you're doing with the Black Leadership Initiative and the Afrocentric field of practice important to the field of social work, and also how it relates to Professor Pinderhughes' contributions to social work?
Dr. Brad, you want to go first?
Yeah, I can go first. I think for me, in a lot of ways, this is both an innovation that moves us forward, and it's also a recalling of the work that many Black pioneers in social work practice have engaged in for a long time. I think we can oftentimes default to this idea of whiteness as a kind of neutral position to be in, and therefore we privilege the history of white social workers within the profession of social work. But the reality is there are writings, from almost 100 years ago of, George E. Haynes and Forster B. Washington about, really the nature of social work in Black communities. And so what we hope to do, in my lowly opinion, is to combine, so much rich history in this area, leveraged with, Boston College's really strong research apparatus. I think for us, I'll speak for myself. I don't want to speak for you, Dr. Parchment, but I think for me, it's really important to not only create really outstanding and stellar classes, but to also push the boundaries with regard to, what practice, community, and scholarship looks like, with regard to the work that we're doing, specifically.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with you, Dr. Bradley. And I think it's with our current and also future BLI fellows, we want to have a cadre of leaders in various different capacities of really bolstering a Black perspective and being ingrained in Afrocentric perspective in their work, right? And so it is equally important to build from within, but also build out, right? Because the knowledge that is grounded from various people who precedes us needs to be out there in the world. So we need to create a system and a pathway of really bringing this perspective, which is the Afrocentric perspective is an epistemic shift from Eurocentric worldview, right? It reveals and critiques and eliminates aspects of white supremacy. It's based in the spiritual component with an emphasis of that we're all interconnected. And it's practice-based. So these are applicable things that can be done in the micro and macro interventions. It can be done in research. It can be done in how we envision and implement policies, right? And but also all of that is tied to the cultural legacy of traditional Africa, where we are all descendants of folks from the African continent. And it's important for us to really center our lived experience in all that we do. And I will also add that I think 2020 created a shift. We have we're still in the COVID pandemic, but also in the summer of 2020, with folks sheltering at home, and then with the advent of social media and being aware of news in a lot more quick fashion, that there was this quote unquote racial reckoning, right? And all of a sudden being Black was now back in vogue, right? And so there institutions created initiative to really wrestle with racism and embedded white supremacy across both culturally and institutionally. And so there was an opportunity in the space for this, even though there's work just like Professor Pinderhughes and others who have done it before, but now there's a resurgence of people are interested because now it's more chic to be able to want to do this work. And to really effectively do this work, I'm always reminded of a lyric from Lauryn Hill. How you gonna win when you ain't right within, right? So win is a metaphor for if we want to fight against white supremacy, we want to fight against marginalization and oppression, it has to start from within. So the journey is not, it is equally important to be able to acquire knowledge and acquire information, but the applicability of it. It's not about just absorbing, but it's really getting into the root, and the work of undoing racism is intense. It's uncomfortable, but it's also liberatory. The path of liberation is not easy. And Professor Emerita Pinderhughes mentioned before, we all have to do it. All have to do it.
Yeah, I think that what strikes me so much is the fact that how far we've come in this work, how much we still have to do, and how much it is based in all the people that come before us and how important it is. And also this piece of the self-reflection piece. And I know that Professor Pinderhughes kind of identified that important piece in her work, in her opening remarks, and really thinking about the importance of examining our own stuff because it is going to impact our practice.
Right. And the thing about being at Boston College and being in a Jesuit institution, reflection is very much tied into that philosophy and ethos. And to your point, Professor Milton, like there's a lot of self-exploration that needs to happen. And yeah.
All right. I have another question for you all. What do you envision for the future what do you envision in the future for the Afrocentric field of practice and the Black Leadership Initiative?
Lots of graduates.
That's on period, yes.
You know, this is, in my opinion, education isn't necessarily built or meant to be fast work, right? It takes time and it's systems based, and you know, it's each one reach one in a lot of ways. And so we've built this program, and you know, there's, first of all, I want to say there's such a rich community of social workers here in Boston and also across the country, folks who have graduated, alumni of the Boston College School of Social Work, who've reached out after the announcement about this new program. And not only were they congratulatory, but they said, how can I help? And, you know, one of the things Professor Milton, Dr. Parchment, we talk about quite often is how inspired we feel about the fact that, you know, there are folks who may not even necessarily get the benefit of some of the course content that we've been working on creating, who are stepping up to be a part of this community. And to me, I think that that is one, an indicator of how awesome sort of the global diaspora of Black folks is across the globe, but also, you know, how important I think many of us sense and realize it is to take these students who are joining us and to really surround them, to hold them up, to support them, and to get them graduated and to get them into really great positions and roles doing good work. I mean, I think the future for us is we find ourselves beginning, we're now in the process of selecting the second cohort. Many have already begun to hear from us and to respond to our invitation to join us for the second year. We've completed the process of creating 3 new courses, including a field of practice and a certificate program. And I think the next steps for us really look like further operationalizing aspects of the Afrocentric theory, you know, really working on the research aspect of it, community asset mapping, so we understand who's where and how we want to come into contact with our community of social workers. And I think it's also going to look a lot like working continuously with those who have graduated to really figure out how to sponsor and mentor current students who are in the program who are going on to graduate. And in the future, I think it will look like us really having in-depth and deep conversations about what practice looks like when we start to see these social workers mature, what lessons we can learn from their practice, what impact comes from their work.
Yeah, I'll completely ditto with you, Dr. Bradley, and also add like really expanding the knowledge base for those who are, who may not be social workers, but are working directly with Black folks of the African diaspora, for interns, for those who have been in the field, whether it be freshly graduated with under 5 years, 10 years, 10 and 20, is to really create a large network and to really get into the systems that so many of us social workers are operating in to really begin the process of truly changing it, right? And it definitely starts with our current cohort, and also in my own research as a licensed clinical social worker with a PhD, I want the work that I do have actually applicable implications to it. And so if we are creating leaders who are grounded in African-centered perspective and in the Black perspective, but we successfully graduate them, but they're in settings where they can't maximize and implement their learning through support or supervision or through connection with colleagues. It's somewhat of a disservice. So the long-term impact is really like how best to build the capacity of those organizations who are largely, if not solely, working with folks of the African diaspora, and to help maximize this knowledge base. There's a long history of it. And as Dr. Bradley mentioned, we also want to expand it. The Afrocentric perspective melds very much with the decolonization process, going back to the roots and origins. It's anti-colonial. Bringing in a queer theory lens and fighting against social inequities around gender and sexuality, about ableism, about anti-immigrant sentiments. There's so many things that we can build into, which is my journey to build that into and get things published and grants funded so that, money talks, right? And so it helps to really expand this knowledge base. So we wanna, build from within, but also be able to expand that and create an infrastructure for students who are graduating from BC to know that there's an extended support network in the work that they're doing. So the education that they receive doesn't just end there. It's a long-term journey. Like when you begin the process of getting education around African-centered theory or African-centric perspective, it is both a personal as well as a professional journey.
Yes, okay. I think it's really interesting because it's not just the focus on the academics, right? There's this piece of like building community and the importance of not only building our like local communities, but kind of like, building out, and then also like how that impacts systemic change and the ways in which we do that. And that means we need funding, we need to evaluate our practice. We need to evaluate, the things that we're doing to make sure that, this is addressing the needs of marginalized communities.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is time for us to transition into the Q&A. Do people have questions that they'd like to ask? Dr. Parchment, Dr. Bradley?
One thing I'll say before, folks start inundating us with questions is, Professor Pinderhughes wrote almost 30 years ago in 1994, an understanding of minority reality must be built upon theoretical approaches that explain cultural dynamics generally and the condition of ethnic minorities and people of color specifically. And, she really goes on to talk about the importance of history serving as a context in the work that we do, and how we use values to explain certain aspects of social work practice. And I think that this is key and fundamental to what we hope to do in the future, which is, to Dr. Parchment's point earlier, which is even rethinking the very definitions that we typically use in our everyday practice, right? So we use this word client, both client as an individual and a system, right? But we don't oftentimes interrogate, where that came from and the bifurcation that we've created, with regard to individuals and communities. Well, Afrocentric theory allows us to understand that really personhood is granted through community. And this is a fundamental reshifting of the way that you might find these concepts thought about, described in a more Eurocentric perspective, right? And so we've got to spend time further exploring these ideas, these values, these really underlying important concepts, and understand how that can fit into building new kinds of interventions for the future in Black communities.
Right, and thank you for bringing that up, Dr. Bradley. And I'm also reminded of a conversation that Professor Emerita Pinderhughes had around power, and that it's important for social workers to not only understand power, but have a power analysis and also have an understanding of power dynamics. And so a lot of the conversation I think all three of us have with our cohort and students in our classes is that it is important, no matter where your function is as a social worker, that you understand the dynamics of the power infrastructure, the organizational culture, right? Both within the organization, the community, the clients that you're serving, but also to understanding what's going on locally, right? There's a Sankofa saying of must look back to the past so that we understand how we become, what we are, and move forward to a better future. And the courses that I designed for the Black Leadership Certificate, the history of activism in Black community, is very much a testament of that. And Professor Pinderhughes noted that history should serve as a context. Like many of the activism and work that's being done today is not necessarily new. It's always off a foundation of what happened before. It might have a new suit, might have a new outfit, might look differently, but the foundation of it comes from before. And in this course, so as social workers, we are advocates, we are activists within our code of ethics. And it's important to know about how activism in the Black community, both in the United States and the Caribbean and continental Africa, how that evolved over time, and how the ethos around activism and advocacy was informed by those who came before them. And so it's equally important to have that understanding in order to really be informed about the work that you're doing. There's a lot of talk about mindfulness, et cetera, but we need to be mindful of what we're doing, and that is grounded by having an historical understanding. And you know, Dr. Bradley and I are history geeks. So we're all about like, you gotta know if you wanna move forward.
I know that you all talk about history and the historical perspectives in many of our meetings.
Yes.
We have another question. How are you thinking about field, the agencies that are used, hold on, there was a couple of questions. How are you thinking about field, the agencies that are used to practice in a certain way, and your approach to bring them the training that you're embarking the students on?
Oh, that's a good question. So we are, and Professor Milton, you're on this, we're working on a potential grant opportunity to really support an organization around Afrocentric social work. And so that is definitely on our next things to do of really branching out. So Professor Milton, Dr. Bradley and I, there is a seminar in field instruction, which is through across all social work schools. And part of our design is to really design it and have it to be African centered, and to really build this level of supervision and support and knowledge base to those who are in the field. So it's definitely something that we hope to do that this year, if once we get the final grant award letter. And so, but this would be a stepping stone to test and see the impact of that, and to branch it out further. And with Professor Milton's role, moving forward with our students who are going to be in their second year field placement. So the field of practice, the Afrocentric field of practice, there will be field placements where they're going to be predominantly work with folks of the African diaspora. And Professor Milton will also be providing support for their field advisor of embedding Afrocentric perspective and supervision in the work. So it is something that we want to do, but again, like it's a large system change, right? And so it is gradual, but it is something that we are intent and ready to do and to move forward with. But we need more bodies than just the three of us. And so there is hope that moving forward, we can expand the cadre of scholars and practitioners, scholars and practitioners, not that they're mutually exclusive, but in terms of doing this work.
Okay. We have another question in the Q&A. Are there any Afrocentric based social emotional learning curriculums that you can recommend that could be used in schools, like in high schools or middle schools?
I would say that the Academy of African-Centered Social Work is definitely a place to begin the journey through the National Association of Black Social Workers, to begin the journey of implementing this perspective. I don't know offhand of modules, but I'm sure I'm not sure offhand of any modules, but I know that there is an article, and I think we could share this after the webinar is over, of utilizing Guzo Saba for youth development. I can't remember the authors offhand right now, but it was published in 2020. That we could provide a link of those articles. But I also know Dr. Jerome Sheely has a YouTube that we can also share that outlines more specific of the Afrocentric perspective. But specifically to that question, I can't think offhand aside of what I just mentioned.
What I would add to that is, y'all, for everybody, the 121 people listening, you can hear the sound of my voice, please, like, you know, we're laughing about it a little bit, but investing in understanding the history of Black communities is so incredibly key that can, in and of itself, be its own entire curriculum, right? I think these undergirding sort of philosophical concepts are really deeply important, and so you shouldn't deny yourself that if you want to read up on Afrocentric theory. But if you could do as much even as learning the history, right, of not only Black communities in America, but globally, I think you would do yourself a wonderful service, you know, overall with regard to education. This is for young folks, and this is for college students, and this is for all of us professional adults like me who discovered Afrocentric theory, you know, 10 years after completing my MSW degree.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I know there's lots of questions in the chat and in the Q&A, and we're going to actually have to move on in our program. And we wanted to honor Professor Pinderhughes, especially on this special centennial birthday. And we've asked people to share their thoughts. And we put together a special video that's going to be shared right now.
Elaine, it was such a pleasure spending the afternoon with you. And it was our privilege to do this afternoon with all of your family and with you in person, because I really don't think of this as a virtual call at all. I just can feel it. I can feel the love. I feel the respect. I feel your influence in everything we've done this afternoon. And thank you again for everything you do for us and continue to do for us. And we want to actually bring this session to a close with this one very important idea that we have started, the Black Leadership Initiative, that is founded on your and others' work that Professors Parchment and Sam Bradley and Luana Milton have discussed. This legacy continues. It'll be built on your work and others' work, and you should be confident about a stronger Boston College School of Social Work that is built on your ideas and your contributions. And we thank you so much. And thank you for everyone for joining and spending this afternoon and not only celebrating Professor Pinderhughes' ideas, but her 100th birthday. And thanks to the Pinderhughes family for being, you know, so generous with their time and making this happen.
Thank you.
Bye, Elaine.
I'm overwhelmed.
Let's process it in person. I'll come to see you. Bye.
Bye.